That's okay.
Need to get Sheila a gavel.
We're gonna call the meeting to order. It's 12:01, and we will ask to see if there's any citizen comments. Okay, no citizen comments, so we'll move on to the agenda on item 3, corrections or additions to the agenda. We don't have any, so we'll move on to active agenda. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for April 11th, 2023. Has everybody had a chance to review those? I think we had some changes to those last time, and those were made.
Also move approval.
Okay,
Second.
all right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is no further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of May 9th, 2023.
I move we approve them as mailed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is approval of invoices. The first invoice is from Elam and Burke. It is an April invoice, and it's for $625, and I believe that was for the training that we had. That's right. That's right.
Are we doing them individually?
Yes.
I will move we approve the invoice for Elam and Burke.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so we have, next on the agenda, 2 invoices. First one, Douglas Law, PLC invoice, number 196 for $240. These are for attorney fees, I believe. I don't have them for any for April. Is it April? March.
They're on here. If you just
Oh,
keep-
yes, thank you. I'm like looking at
Keep
the-
going down. Well, I was kind of cross-checking with my packet.
Perfect, thank you. It's hard to.
So we had a line through, so
Yes.
we've paid one of those already.
Correct, the URA previously paid for that one, so we crossed through that and totaled the 195 plus 45 for March.
So we're not double paying.
Correct.
That's no fun.
We try not to do that.
I
My
move we
sister would
pay
have to
$240 on the Douglas Law invoice.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the invoice, invoice number 196 for $240.
Is that, are we correct on the math there?
Mhm.
Then,
Yeah.
okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is another Douglas Law PLLC invoice, and it is invoice number 297, for the amount of $645.
It's for April.
And this is for April.
And it's the one that's not on the back.
I will move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so we have the next item on the agenda is a review of financial summary for May of 2023. I think those were handed out today, and those are just an information only. I don't know if Shannon has anything you want to add.
We don't have those on here.
Yeah,
Correct,
they
they're
were
not
handed
part
out
of
to you.
Yeah, so this gets us through May. And every month Carolyn from the city finance department updates these. And
Are
so,
we done with invoices? No.
yes. Did you think there was another?
Oh, I don't, number 196 was the next thing
The first
after.
one.
That was the first one.
That was the first one.
Yeah.
We got a out of order on
And then 297 was second.
it. Okay. I'm ready.
So are you gonna
Sorry.
put, you gonna put this on here, or are you gonna have to do a handout
Yeah.
each time?
It depends on the timing. So sometimes we get them in time to put them in the packet and sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we will try.
Kind of like a handout, so I can put in
Your URA
my
file.
folder.
Okay. So, anyway, like I said, this is always by fiscal year, so it starts in October, it will end in September, and we just keep on adding to, it every month. The top line you will see are the collections of property tax, and those will change every month, depending on what the city has, what the URA has collected. The second sheet is the bond for the East Orchard Sewer, and as you know, we make a bond payment in August, September.
So now, we paid the city back completely on East Main.
Yes,
We did that last meeting, right?
2 meetings ago.
Two months ago, yeah. Okay.
And even after that, then that account has 395,000 in it? So-
Correct.
Is it enough to do
The water line
well, not the water line, but
path?
that path?
I don't believe it is.
Probably not, since it's going all the way down to the levee.
But we'll talk about East Main, later on in the agenda.
Right.
All right, so the financials were just for information only. Is there any further discussion about financials? All right, then I guess we'll move on the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is Main, East Main.
We're here.
Our AA4 and our future direction. So the last meeting, we discussed this in detail, and we were gonna have some conversations with the county to see if they might be a potential interested in supporting that project. So we had 2 items that were left to complete, the pedestrian path and the water line, and I know Shannon was gonna visit with the county.
The
Or
county,
Dawn.
but Dawn visited with the county.
And I can report on that.
Okay.
Where the county's not interested in partnering at this time.
Okay,
We're keeping all of our interest on the courthouse, so it's kind of one of those situations where down the road, if the city decides they want to go in something like that,
okay.
we may partner with them, but right now we can't do it.
All right, so we have no viable partners on the water line. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, we were,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, and we were looking at the financials, there was only $395,691 in that account. So it looks like that partnership with the county and the city is off, and the project is probably not viable at this point, I'm guessing, so I would,
No, we estimated that project would take, if the URA were to do it alone, you would have to keep the revenue allocation area open until term. And at the end of that term, you might be able to afford it solely. But that is, that's based on some estimates.
That includes both the water line and the dike access?
No, that was just simply the water line.
Okay.
When is it scheduled to close?
2020, yeah, it was 28, 29.
And so you wouldn't have enough money for either project, you think, at the end?
There's probably money for the dike access, but previous conversations were that we did not want to pursue that one,
Without a grant.
either way.
Or,
That was my understanding.
oh. I didn't realize we'd made a decision.
Do we have any kind of a scope of what that project would look like, the access for?
Yeah, the city has put in for a federal lands access project, federal lands access program grant, and so that's where that came from, and it's part of the plan. The diagrams in the revenue allocation area plan are from that grant application.
This 2017. So this is one of the sketches. Another simplified one was kind of on that, but
It was kind of helpful to look at that.
So it's an actual path.
Yeah, I kind of walked out there and looked at it. It looked like it would have pretty hard access to get to the dike path from my perspective, but
There would be some complications with the railroad and the
Yeah.
Corps of Engineers for sure on that one. Not completely insurmountable, but I think does the board, my understanding in previous conversations with the board, it was not a project that the URA still felt like went along with its mission. So that's why I didn't do a lot of work on it.
With our, what we had to go through to get access across the railroad bridge on Cherry Lane Ridge, I don't know, it took a few years.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly it's not very cut and dry.
They're not easy to work with.
So it would appear that our best option is to be patient, keep the area open, see what develops with residue toward the end of that, and then we have some flexibility.
I would say that
Correct?
is an option. I don't know that any one of them are the best option.
No,
So
but
an
we're not
option-
determining that today.
You are determining which direction you wanna go. So do you want to leave the revenue allocation area open and see where, it can do you wanna keep it open and still pursue that waterline project if you think it's a viable project to do? Do you want to explore the path any further? Or do you want to feel like both of those projects aren't viable projects and move to close the revenue allocation area? So there's kind of
I'm a little confused. So if I look at the statute, there's nothing that says you have to decide before the revenue allocation area closes under a schedule. You don't have to do anything. So it seems to me that waiting is an option.
as I said, waiving is an option.
Because what I'm hearing is pick project A, pick project B, or close it. So waiting is an option, and do you have an opinion on which one's better?
No.
So I must have misheard, sorry.
So the options moving forward are you can keep it, right now, if you do nothing, you keep the revenue allocation area open and decide at a further date if you want to pursue either of those two projects. In the past, the URA has amended plans to include other projects. That can be somewhat controversial to do, but you have two projects in the current plan. So yes, you are able to keep this open and decide at a later date. You can also move to close if you want to. You can decide, you know what, we don't think that these projects are worth moving forward with. This was a plan that was done in 2017, it was a different time. Maybe you don't think those are viable projects anymore and you want to pursue them. The city has said that they are not today interested in partnering in the waterline project. They have other priorities. That doesn't mean that further down in a year or two, they have some free time to design the project, for example, or to go in on it. So I am not saying you must do something, we just had to keep this on the agenda because that was the direction to do so.
I guess I was confused because I thought you said that they had to make a decision today, and I wondered what I was missing. But they don't have to.
The decision is you either keep it open and continue with a plan moving forward, or you close it.
Okay, thank you.
So, question? Shannon, has the city given any idea
No.
Whether they're interested in the next 5 years?
I mean, certainly it is a project that needs upgrading within the system. There, I would say, I mean, Luke is right here, he can answer this also, but it does appear that right now they would not commit to anything just because of the uncertainty of what's going on right now.
And when you say this project, are you referring to the water line or the access?
Water line,
Okay, thank you.
because that's the biggie. And that's, seems to me to be the most important one.
Well, it seems to me that the water line is a more potential project, certainly. But I like the option of leaving it open. The city isn't interested today, they might be in 2 or 3 years. Why not have the flexibility of determining later, when times are changed, to see if the water line project, one, is viable or not, or in second, we might see something else that arises in that period of time to potentially amend the plan.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And to recap, for the community to get value out of that project, there need to be a development down there.
Partnership.
Or, I mean, so right now, the 3-inch water line is small by design. But it's not a crisis unless somebody were to develop something down there.
It does prohibit development currently. Yeah, so you could look at it as an economic development type of project where you upgrade any infrastructure and build it and they will come, so to speak. You know, that it would alleviate one less development cost. You know, is that blocking development currently? There aren't a lot of properties out there. And the one that had the biggest piece of property
Isn't interested.
is not interested, because that property has water access from the south.
Doesn't need the main street.
Correct.
Okay.
There is fire flow concerns, and that's why when one of the other properties wanted to do some development on their current property, they were not able to because of concerns with fire flows.
How easy is it to open an RAA?
It's not. So I'll just to recap how that works on the city's administrative side of things, is that the URA pays a flat fee for administration of the URA unless there's an opening or a closing of a revenue allocation area, and that was on purpose. That's by hourly rate, because that is additional work that you normally would not do. You don't open and close revenue allocation areas very often. So if there was a move to close the RAA, then we would have to go through steps to do that.
And the opening one is even more time consuming, because
It
you
was
have to
probably
collect all
built.
this data.
Yeah, that's what
It
I
is
was
very
really
difficult.
after.
And
was-
expensive.
Well, okay, so are you asking, could you reopen one for that one?
Project down the road.
You could. The risk there is that you reset the base. And so you would close it today, and all of the monies that are collected to the point that we close are then redistributed to the taxing entities. And then you could reopen a revenue allocation area. There are some URAs, sorry, these acronyms. There are some URAs that do specifically open just for a project. They're not as kind of wide open as the ones that Lewiston has, where there's the potential for several projects. Sometimes a developer will approach a urban renewal agency and say, is there an opportunity here? You know, do we have blight? You know, you go through the steps of opening up a revenue allocation area. So you could do that if you wanted to.
That
It can be done.
It doesn't seem like that would make the most sense, though. I mean, if it,
So the downsides to these options would be, if kept it open. The downside is the other taxing entities don't get their money back.
Correct.
And if we,
And you're continuing to collect.
yes,
They
okay.
don't get their money
So-
back, at least temporarily.
At
And maybe
temporary.
at some point they do get their money
Yeah.
back. Or if one of these projects,
And then the downside to closing it is we limit our options.
Correct.
Or
Like Tim brings up,
cancel.
you could, I mean, let's say 10 years from now, the city's like, all right, you know what, we're ready to partner with you on East Main again. You could reopen a revenue allocation area at that time for that project specifically, if you wanted to.
but it sounds like a pain to
Or-
do so.
Well, I mean,
could-
that's what,
Or we could say do it yourself. We already
Oh,
been
sure.
down that road.
yeah, sure. Yeah, and I'll remind the board that it's not a requirement to have the city partner with something. That has been practice on a lot of the projects within this particular URA, but it's not policy that you've set. You can set that policy if you want to, but that's not something that you've set.
So if we keep it open, what is the potential likelihood that it would be completed? Like how much money will be be calculated in there that we would actually have to complete the project? Would there be any, I mean, is it even viable at all?
It's close. So I went through that exercise 2
Yeah.
months ago, and it is close. You would definitely have to wait till the end, and that's assuming that you wouldn't have some major inflation that would come into play that would
That's
make
my-
it unaffordable. So there's a lot of unknowns moving forward, but when we did that calculation, you would not be able to do that project on your own without a bond until in the very latter years of the term.
What was that gonna get us to, like 1.2 million or something, the projection
Yeah, it was, I thought it was closer to 2.
closer?
And so if we do the project toward the end, when it needs to be closed, how does that work? Since I'm unfamiliar with, if you're starting a project when it's just close to closing, what does that look like?
Well,
Is that a possibility or?
if you have open liabilities, you cannot close. So it becomes complicated. And that's why I'm saying, this one's I don't have a lot of experience with these,
Yeah.
but it's cutting it close.
If I recall correctly, and I could go back and look at this, I think you just no longer collect revenue. And if
But you still have the liabilities hanging out.
You have a time period, I believe, in which you can reasonably complete your contracts, but
Okay.
don't quote me on that. I'll have to go back and
Yeah.
look if that becomes something that we have to pursue. I don't think we've been in that situation yet.
So the other way you look at it too is what businesses you've increased out there, the tax is coming up, and if you turn it back to the entities for their share, then you've still got tax coming in that city may come up with enough money to do it without having to have the URA open. That's another way to look at it. Because you have increased the tax base out there somewhat.
I still, with our discussion, kind of favor the flexibility of being patient. And I'll tell you what's in my mind. It's a what if. What if that's a potentially popular area? What if there's some development and water line is needed and the new development, the new business would then partner with us on the water line as a solution to growth in the area and having fire protection. It seems to me that if we remain patient, that we have the potential to do some good down the road. And if not, we've collected a little more money, but we can always, toward the end, close the project if there's simply no potential.
You could tickle it for annual review as well.
I mean, that sounds like a good idea, just
Seems smart, doesn't
do
it?
an annual review of it.
That way you're not holding everybody hostage waiting. Like, is this money gonna be returned? Are we gonna close this? If the other taxing districts know that you're reviewing it consistently, then, that's a lot of transparency and responsibility.
I like that.
So if we keep it open, then I think it's something that we need to consider, like having a plan in place for how we're moving forward with it, not just letting it sit there with a what if, in my opinion. This is me speaking in my opinion. I feel like, the entities are out there, they have high priorities at the county and the city both. I'm sure they could use those funds to be dispersed back to them. So I wanna make sure that if we are keeping it open, that we're doing our due diligence. Commissioner Havens was in here last time, expressing his point of views on, how we need to be transparent moving forward, trying to be good stewards of taxpayer money. So I think if we're gonna keep it open, we need to make sure that we're doing that, being transparent about it.
So what I would recommend then is that you would do an annual review, but you would do it earlier in the year. There's a timing, if you were to, let's say next year you revisit this, more information has come to light, we do another fiscal analysis and it's like, there's no way you can accomplish this. To close a revenue allocation area, this right now is one of the worst times to close one because you're coming upon, you have to have something closed by the fourth Monday in July, according to the State Tax Commission. And so I would recommend that any of these reviews you would do earlier in the year so that we're not coming up against those types of deadlines, that you'd want to make that decision, because you would have to step through a resolution at the URA, council ordinances and those types of things. So maybe what we do is we make a recommendation to continue to keep the revenue allocation area number 4 open. We are not looking to amend the plan at this time, and we will revisit it in March of 2024.
I like that. And top of my mind, and I bet yours too, is that we simply have a problem servicing that area with the 3-inch water line. It's just not sufficient.
Yes, I would put that into the form of a motion.
And maybe what the other thing we do is make sure to let folks know that review will happen in March, and so if you wanted to accept comment, you could.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to keep the East Main project open for review in March. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Any unfinished, in the next on the agenda is unfinished and new business, so we have board member comments. Anybody has anything they wanna say?
I've got a question that's not really related to the URA, but I'm curious. I heard a rumor about the Lewiston premix has been sold, that area down on Snake River Avenue, and that the purchaser is going to build a hotel down there. Anybody heard anything like that?
Well, you can tell it's shut down and cleaned up.
They've
Right,
done a
right.
lot of work down there already.
Sure doesn't look like a hotel site to me.
The city has
Well-
received no permit applications for
Okay.
hotels.
Just-
Sounds like rumor.
Yeah.
However, the
Signboard,
waterfront plan
The
does
Primix
allow.
signboard mentions closing.
Okay.
Yeah, the city has a waterfront plan that talks about hotels along the waterfront, so that could be, that oftentimes when we have plans, that's how rumors start. Well, I thought they were gonna put this there, you know what I mean? And so that might be what's going on, I don't know.
Definitely got my interest. Something kind of new and fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of a small area for a motel though, isn't it? You take in parking and everything, right against the co-op there.
There are some
Sounds
very
like it'd be
small
snug, doesn't it, Don?
boutique
Yeah.
hotels though,
Yeah.
that don't take a whole lot of space.
I mean, it'd be a nice location, I think.
Love to see it at the airport myself,
Yeah.
the baseball field.
I
That
agree.
too.
Or both,
I
Yeah.
agree.
More the merrier.
yeah.
Maybe we'll get 2 for the
How about
price of
And a
one.
restaurant.
All those places.
At the airport would be
But you can always
There's
email
no place to-
us at the city if you have questions like that, and we'll let you know if we've received anything.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, any other board comments, questions? All right, staff comments.
So, I and myself and Katie will be gone the second week of July. And we do need to look at the draft, budget for 2024. This July is when we do that. And so I would very much like to move the meeting, propose a new meeting day for July. And I believe when I tried to put it on the next Tuesday, Joe, did you have a conflict? Do you have a different meeting going on at that time, or Sheila, maybe
I
you
do,
do?
on the 18th of July.
Yeah, I still have just URA and a question mark on the 18th for
On the
me. but
18th of
nothing-
July.
No conflict, but
Okay. So then if we wanted to, so we will be gone that full week, so we won't be able to do that week, but the week after is a possibility, and we could, it doesn't have to be Tuesday, it could be Thursday the 20th, if that works for folks.
I'd have to really check, because we're in the, ending up our board of equalization and working on our budget. So I'm not exactly sure, I'd have to really check the schedule, but once you schedule it, then I'll, you decide and
I'll put
Let
it
us
in.
know if you can come.
Yeah.
I'll put a place marker in for the 20th.
Is
Okay,
it just for the budget? I'm in trial that day, but
yeah,
I don't, I mean, if I can review the budget in advance, the only thing is sometimes there's
And it's-
procedural questions.
it's the draft budget too.
It's the draft budget,
Yeah,
okay.
so I think it should be okay.
I may be gone.
Okay. Okay, so we'll pencil it in for the 20th then, and, or we will
That works for you?
move it to the
Yeah.
20th.
And I can do the 19th as well, the 18th is just not a good day, because I'm at the
Okay.
airport.
So noon on the 20th,
Correct. Does that work for you, Butch?
you bet.
All right, awesome.
All right. Any other staff comments?
So, as you see, we have these tablets here, and I think most of you had heard, but we, at the city, started to use these with our other boards and commissions. 20 years ago, when I started with the city, we were doing huge packets, every commission, every week.
I don't want to
And,
wake it up, I went to sleep.
uh-oh, probably hit,
push your,
yeah, hit the screen or the space bar. Or maybe yours just is dead.
There we go.
Okay. So, and it's worked pretty well. We've done it for a couple months with other boards and commissions, so we wanna try it out with you. And so the question would be, you know, we'd like to use these if we could. It reduces time and money with postage and trees and paper and everything. But if you really do not like using these tablets, then we can still provide you with a paper copy.
Let's give it a try.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. And I think that's what the other boards are too. We haven't had any complaints yet, but you know, it's only been a couple months, so.
You'll still email it out in advance?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, we'll still email
So we
out
can
the
print
full
our
packet for you to
agenda.
review ahead of time, and you can always print out bits and pieces that you thought you would want to have.
I like to scribble on mine.
Yeah.
Information.
For sure. And we'll always have, if you wanted to scribble on something, we'll always have printed copies of these, because we have them for the public. So if you wanted to use the tablet to scroll through the packet, but you wanted something to scribble on, we'll still have these.
Well, if you're emailing it out, I can always run a copy off.
That's
so.
true too.
I like the idea, so,
Yeah.
awesome. All right. Well, with that, I don't think there's anything else on our agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
That's so moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Motion passes.
There we go.
Awesome.
Shut down.